Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another video and another installment in my Land Before Time series. If you guys are just hopping on, we've already covered the first film, the original 1988 classic that had people like Steven Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy, and George Lucas involved. It had tons of other amazing talent, and for its time was a classic, a film that changed things. It's just one of those memorable animated films of that time with beautiful animations and a heart-wrenching story. And revisiting that film was a lot of fun. It was a nice, charming revisit that took me back to nostalgic days. And, you know, at its core, it's a pretty simplistic movie, but an enjoyable time. And in that video, I talked about how me and my guest here in this video and in this entire series, Mike from Did You See That, we're going to be covering the 13 sequels that this film has. So without further ado, let's get into the next installment in this series, the first straight to VHS copy or movie in this series, and that is The Land Before Time 2, The Great Valley Adventure. Directed this time around by Roy Allen Smith, The Great Valley Adventure picks up after they've gotten to the Great Valley and came out in 1994 and has some new stars playing certain characters like Scott McAfee, as well as Heather Hogan, Jeff Bennett. You have people like Rob Paulston in here as well. And the only returning actor in this film was Candice Hudson as Sarah. Before we get too far into this, if you're new here to the channel, my name is Anthony A. Perez, and on here we cover movies, TV, I do some vlogs, I do some live streams. I haven't done too many recently, but I plan to do a lot more as time goes on. And yeah, we just cover all things new and old in terms of movies here on the channel. And I'm very happy today to be joined by my buddy Mike from Did You See That, who covers all things movies, does a bunch of live streams, does food tastings over there, and has a bunch of Back to the Future content. So if you're not already familiar with my channel or his, I recommend going ahead and subscribing to our channel, as you can find his link in my description down below. And of course, for my channel, it's right down there. It's that red button that says subscribe. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. And if you are a regular, a big thanks for you coming back, as we're going to talk about The Land Before Time 2, The Great Valley Adventure. This is a movie that I think may be the final one in this franchise that I've ever seen. Now, I was born in 93. This one came out in 94. So it is very possible that some of the sequels that came out after this, I saw just kind of in pieces here or there. The original Land Before Time was a nostalgic watch for me. I feel like that was a movie that was on very often when I was a kid, that I saw all the time at some sort of daycare or some sort of church event where they would just throw it on. And so, yeah, it was nice to go back and revisit that film and have a great time with it. And moving forward, I didn't remember anything that was going to happen. And I mentioned in that last video that the only thing that I knew that was gonna come at some point was a little purple T-Rex, and that happened in this film, the character of Chomper. So we're gonna get into what this movie is all about, but I just wanna go ahead and welcome you guys to start typing down below your thoughts on this franchise. If you have a favorite in this series, comment it down below. Is there a movie coming 10 movies from now that I should look out for, knowing that it's gonna be the best in the series? Let me know down below, but for now, let's get into this. So like I mentioned, the first movie is all about them trying to get to the Great Valley. It's a place where they're gonna be okay, that they're gonna be safe, that they're gonna go and live and be happy amongst all the other herbivores. And yeah, you know, that first movie definitely tackles a lot of kind of like racism and prejudice, as all the various different dinosaurs, the long necks, the three horns, they don't talk to one another, and there's a specific reason for that, and it's just kind of societal separation. And so now you have these kids that kind of grow this beautiful friendship, almost like a little family unit, that, you know, end up kind of showing that that's not the way it should be, you know? And so I like the fact that the first film touches on prejudice and things like that, and how the older generations a lot of times will try to keep the younger generations apart from one another. But a lot of times, if you allow them to just spend time with one another, they realize how similar they are, and they're able to use their differences to, you know, be strengths in their situations. And so, yeah, this movie picks up right when they're in the Great Valley now, and they're just living their life normally, and they end up coming across two punks that end up finding an egg and try to steal it. They try to chase these guys away. They end up coming across a different egg, thinking it's the egg that they were trying to save originally, and it turns out this is an egg for a T-Rex. Now, this is a cute little purple dinosaur that they named Chomper, that ends up following them around everywhere and creates a really great bond with the long neck, or, you know, little long neck in this movie, Littlefoot, and they end up going on a little adventure together. The T-Rex show up later on, the parents looking for their baby, and there's a lot of threat, you know, One thing that's a downside about this series so far already is I forgot that the villains or the carnivores in this movie, you know, they are all just mindless beasts for the most part. They don't say anything. So the T-Rex, when they show up, you know, they're the sharp tooths, the sharp teeth, as they call them. And yeah, you know, they just roar. They're just T-Rex, you know. So I hope that as time goes on that the villains have something to say as well. We do have villains that do have something to say here, but they're not like, they're not really menacing. We'll get into that in just a second. But yeah, so you have this T-Rex that has now been, you know, hatched around these little cute dinosaurs and is building a friendship with them. And again, kind of showing that, you know, you have the most dangerous being known out there, the T-Rex, and a baby who isn't already kind of thinking about other dinosaurs, is just having fun with these herbivores and not thinking about the fact that, you know, he wants to, you know, eat them. Now, there are a couple moments where it seems like its instincts are coming out, but yeah, once again, you're touching on those themes of these kids coming across another kid from, you know, what's supposed to be a dangerous family and ultimately creating a bond there. And then over the course of the film, you have those two jackass dinosaurs that I told you were trying to steal the egg earlier in the film. And yeah, they're just kind of the annoying tough guy and dumb guy that work together. There's the smart guy that comes up with the plans, very Pinky and the Brain-esque. Speaking of which, you have Rob Paulston playing one of them, who is, you know, iconic for playing so many characters over animation, specifically from Pinky and the Brain. And so, yeah, you know, I felt a very Pinky and the Brain vibe with these two characters. And we've seen it a million times, right? The two henchmen, the two lackeys. There's usually the dumb, dopey one, and then there's the, you know, the other one that's smarter and a little bit more in control of what's going on. And so you have those two kinds of characters, that kind of archetype that's in this film as a threat for our younger dinosaurs, but ultimately they're just kind of like a nuisance throughout the course of the film. You know, they almost get our characters a couple of times, but the bigger threat at certain points is definitely the sharp teeth, the, you know, the T-Rex that would appear later on, or the parents of the T-Rex. And so pretty much it's just this journey of these kids going out, just having fun, coming across a T-Rex. They have to juke these, you know, egg thieves a couple of times, and then some T-Rex show up at the end, and then their parents come to save the day. They end up closing up the Great Valley because there was a hole that kind of opened that allowed some of these carnivores to come in. And that's pretty much it. It's just pretty straightforward, you know, movie ends kind of cookie cutter way, you know, straight to VHS kind of follow up to an original film. And so overall, what I can say about this film is I enjoyed it. You know, I thought it was cute. Like, I don't think this is a movie that is any way, shape, or form as good as the first one. You know, I enjoyed the look and the feel of it. It doesn't have the same charm in terms of its animation. The animation definitely has that slight downgrade, which is crazy because the movie the original came out in '88, and this one came out in '94. And so even with that little bit of a leap forward in time, when you jump to the VHS release, there is a bit of a downgrade in the animation. I feel like there was a little bit more of a charm put into that '88 film, and then there was a little bit more of just like a straight-to-video feel with this one. And that's something I'm looking forward to as time goes on, because I know that some of the later films in this franchise came out a little bit more recently, maybe not super recently, but somewhat recently. So I'm hoping that the animation, even for a straight-to-DVD or straight-to-Blu-ray, you know, story, is a little bit more updated, you know what I mean? Which I almost am positive that that will be the case. But as far as a straight to VHS film that came out at this time back in 1994, yeah, there's definitely elements of this that are certainly very dated as far as its look. Now, I definitely have more I want to talk about in this movie, but I'm going to go ahead and pass off the floor to my buddy Mike from Did You See That to share his thoughts on the movie, and then we'll get back to mine in just a moment.
Hey Perez, what's going on, my man? Thank you so much for inviting me back onto the channel once again to talk about the second installment in the Land Before Time series, which is the Land Before Time 2, The Great Valley Adventure. Now, before we started this series, I knew there was one movie, never mind 14. So Anthony, when you invited me on, yeah, I was like, okay, well, I'm down for the ride. And yeah, so far, I pretty much enjoyed the first movie. I never checked it out as a kid, so at the age of 31 years old, this was the first time I ever checked that out. Now, going into the Land Before Time 2, I do know that all the rest of these installments are like direct to video or DVD installments. This one is directed by Roy Allen Smith, if I've got that correctly, and the only returning voice cast is Candice Hudson. So I'm sure by now Anthony's probably gone over like the plot, the actors, everything, that kind of shenanigans. So let me just get straight into my thoughts and very quick thoughts at that. The animation is completely different style to the first movie. This one, I would say, is probably a little bit more predictable than the first outing, and you can tell that this one doesn't really seem to have the passion and the same production values as the first one did. Now, I can appreciate that the first movie, The Land Before Time, had a kind of platform to step on, right? Like, it was brand new, it had all these executive producers, it was more of like a fresh idea for the time, and by all means, it was well received. It did really well, so that's why it spawned probably so many direct-to-video sequels, and they're probably cheap to make also. So yeah, in this movie, you know, our characters are likable as always, but Sarah is still a stone cold bitch. There's no getting around it. I do not like her character. In this movie, she does nothing really at all to be redeeming. This series could generally do without her character. And I really don't know by the time we get to the last installment if I'm actually going to feel any different on her character or not. Being honest with you, I felt like this movie was mediocre. There was points where I enjoyed certain elements of it, for sure. And I certainly like the fact that, you know, Littlefoot and Ducky are given more screen time, and they deserve it because they're the best parts of this movie entirely, and more of the family dynamic between Littlefoot and his grandparents, or grand dinosaurs, whatever you want to call them. I like those elements of it, but again, I think like the predictability factor of it, and Sarah, it was okay. At the end of the day, you know, I completely appreciate that these movies are for kids, and they're probably like, I'm not probably like the target audience for this kind of movie. But what I will say is that I felt like it was definitely a step down from the first movie, and going forward, I'm certainly intrigued as to where they're going to go with this series and what they're going to do with them, and especially with all these direct to, like, you know, video DVD sequels, because I do believe that Roy Allen Smith does also direct the next 2 movies. So we're going to simply see where it goes, but I think kind of long longevity, especially knowing that there's 14 of them, I'm assuming the story's not going to advance that much, but I could very well be wrong. But anyway, yeah, I'm sure Anthony will leave links in the description box below of my channels and stuff. But anyway, over on my channel, did you see that? I do movie reviews, TV reviews, vlogs, Back to the Future content, food reviews. I do all sorts of stuff, so I'd love to see you over there. But once again, I just want to thank Anthony for his time. Thank you for inviting me onto this series so far, my man. And he's hoping that The Land Before Time 3 steps up over this one.
A big thanks to Mike from Did You Z. A big thanks to Mike from Did You Z that for joining me here in another video. Always a pleasure, man. And I'm looking forward to the 12 other sequels that we have to cover in this series. And I just want to say a big thanks to Mike for taking the time out of his own life to watch these movies for and with me. I genuinely appreciate it. But yeah, one thing I definitely want to touch on, I wanted to wait till Mike said his part about this. The character of Sarah. Now, all of these characters are likable and cute. Now, we do have some recastings, and I want to talk about that now in a moment. But Sarah, the character of Sarah, that has the only returning actress to play that role, Candice Hudson. God, yeah, like Mike said, she is just a stone cold bitch. Like, everything that happens in the first film, and a lot of times in this film, has to do with her. A lot of it is just her selfish attitude, and I am really hoping that they do not treat her like a character like Sharpay from the High School Musical films. A character that is just a stone cold bitch, that is completely selfish, that does not think about anybody else the entirety of the series. But for some reason, at the end of the movie, when this person feels left out or is hurt or feels sad, our main characters come and kind of scoop them back up and say, hey, you're our friend again. That's exactly what they did with those High School Musical movies with a character like Sharpay, and I'm really hoping that's not the case with Sarah as we move forward, because she is just so annoying, and she's just such a terrible character in terms of the kind of role that she plays here. I don't mind there being complications and characters butting heads, because I feel like that's what you need to make any sort of dramatic story. But when it comes to Sarah, she's just so selfish. She's just so bad. It makes you wonder why these kids even hang out with her. Whereas everybody else in the group, even if they disagree at times, you know they truly care about one another, and you know that they're truly good characters. Whereas with Sarah, I 110 million% do not believe that. So yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I am very curious to see what they do with their character moving forward, because genuinely, if I have seen another series or another movie in this series, I should say, then I can promise you that I don't remember them. I don't remember them. I may remember visuals or certain little moments that may happen, but yeah, not at all. One thing I haven't touched on here that I need to touch on is that this film includes musical numbers, and I am very sad to say that most of them were horrible. There are a couple of them that are so ironic and so silly in their lyrics and their overall feel and vibe that it was entertaining and enjoyable to watch. But if I'm completely and utterly honest with you, there was a couple of songs, specifically one that plays in the end credits as they're starting up, that the kids sing earlier in the film and then sing as the credits are rolling, that's just bad. Like, the lyrics are bad, the melody is bad, and mind you, I love musicals. I watch musicals on a regular basis, and especially around this era of time, I love animated films, Disney films, anything that had musical numbers. I mean, I love that kind of stuff. I've covered a lot of that here on the channel, so that's no surprise to anybody who's been around for a while. So it's not that I don't like movies like this, you know, animated kid film from my era, you know, musical numbers, 2D animation, all of that just is 100% right within my wheelhouse. I can see a movie from this time frame that I've never seen before that has good musical numbers, good animation, and a good story, and fall in love with it because I'm just nostalgic for this time in, you know, children's animation. And this is the time that I grew up and then I was a kid. So yeah, I want to make it abundantly clear. For me, it's not about like not liking movies like this, but the musical numbers in this movie, outside of maybe one or two that were kind of silly and I enjoyed them on that level, yeah, they're not great, and definitely something that brought this movie down in comparison to how good the first film is for what it is. You also have Michael Tavera this time doing the score of the film, and it's just weird because I feel like I never really saw his name on screen. I know it popped up, but you know, they say in the opening credits and in the closing credits, you know, that the original, you know, music composed by James Horner, who did the original score, which was a great score. And so Michael had to kind of go in there and take what James did and kind of just reprised it a lot. He did bring some new pieces of music throughout the course of the film, but a lot of it is just reprised music from the first one. So yeah, you know, Michael Tavera. And then one thing I have to talk about that I did not talk about in my original review for the first Land Before Time, which kind of pains me that I forgot to talk about it in that video, but I wanted to definitely mention it here, is as I mentioned, we have some new faces playing certain characters, and the most notable one of those to talk about, because when it comes to little cute dinosaurs and, you know, these kid dinosaurs, you can tell the change in the voice. I can understand where, you know, the kids were aging out and they brought in different people to play these characters over time. I mean, these, you know, 14 movies later, they're still little kids, so you still gotta have little kids. You can't have the same little kid from the first movie come back to play him. It's just not gonna make sense. But in the case of the character of Ducky, who is a precious character and was even more precious in the first film because she was actually played by a very, very young actress. Yeah, Judith Barcy, who played the character of Ducky, actually passed away shortly after the release of that original Land Before Time. I believe she was shot. I could be wrong, but I believe that she was killed in some sort of tragedy like that, some sort of family tragedy. I forgot to mention that in my last review, but yeah, what a tragedy, you know, like this young girl who played such a sweet character, you know what I mean? Like, that's something I love about film, is like that girl has been gone. She's been gone for decades, and it's one of those things now where you just kind of like hear her voice and you hear this cute little girl who played this cute little, you know, character named Ducky, and you just can't help but think, oh man, like that's one of my favorite things about film, is like really being able to capture the soul and spirit of somebody who has passed on, especially somebody as young as Judith Barcy. I think Heather Hogan does a good job here taking up the role and playing the character. You know, I think she still captures the essence of who Ducky is. But, you know, going into this movie knowing that it wasn't the same voice actress, she was probably the one that stood out to me the most, because there was such a charm and genuine energy that came from Judith Barcy for the first film that just wasn't present here as much. But I do think Heather Hogan followed up pretty good. But yeah, you know, even though it's been decades since this young girl's passed away, I just wanted to mention it in one of these videos because yeah, she's definitely part of the legacy of this franchise from that first film, and for me is the most iconic voice of Ducky, at least in my memory. So yeah, wanted to mention that moving forward. I don't know how much the cast changes as we go through the next 12 movies, but yeah, that was definitely the cast change that I wanted to speak on the most because it came out of tragedy. And that's all I really have to say on this movie. It's a silly, good, cute, fun time, I think, for the the most part, but it's not the greatest. It's a movie that is, straight to VHS nonsense. That if you grew up, in the 90s, you would probably saw this as some sort of aftercare school event or some sort of church event, like I mentioned, or something where they just kind of threw stuff on in front of you. If you've seen the Land Before Time movies and you just think, man, I remember that there's a little purple T-Rex, this is the one. I don't know if he comes back later on. Maybe he does. My guess is he probably does. And maybe I've seen those movies too. I don't know. Because I can genuinely tell you that watching this movie, I didn't remember anything about the story. When I rewatched the first Land Before Time, there were elements I didn't remember, but for the most part, I've seen the movie a million times, so I remembered the general story. Here and moving on, I have no idea what to expect. So a big thanks to you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and this breakdown of this movie. I enjoyed talking about it. I enjoyed watching it, and I'm looking forward to watching the other 12, because at this point in my life, with all the new big things that are coming out in all forms of entertainment, whether it's music, movies, video games, TV shows, I think it's really important sometimes to go back and just revisit things from simpler times. And that's one of my favorite things to do here on the channel, is revisit things that are nostalgic to me or that came out at a time that maybe I missed it, or, in the case of this, a franchise that I saw the beginning of a million times as a kid, but never even knew that they had 13 sequels that I could dive into. And even if they're all terrible, I'm looking forward to covering them, and I want to thank my guest Mike from Did You See That for joining me in this installment and for the next 12 coming up. And I hope you guys enjoy these videos as time goes on. A big thanks to you guys for watching. Leave your comments down below. What is your favorite The Land Before Time memory? I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.